Yeah.
This bit here? Oh,
No,
yeah.
this right here.
Okay. I think it's even. Okay, so that's live there. What? Way further down. Oh yeah. Lower this down a bit more this way. Hold on, so we get that.
Yeah.
No, I gotta. It gets this far down. I gotta take that tape off
Okay.
if you want to go.
No, that's fine.
Can you keep it level?
Okay.
Oh yeah, we can go all the way down to the floor.
How? I'll go this way. I thought.
And then it's a bit more level, isn't it?
Okay, I see. Right, let's get these going, and we'll start. I don't wanna.
Is that okay?
That's fine. That's fine.
Are you sure? I will move it a bit that way.
Wait, I don't have Rick in this picture here.
Oh, his legs are missing.
This is a tight shot here, so this is kind
I
of the whole
think that's
group.
fine.
You think
That's
fine?
fine.
Yeah.
I'm recording on
Yeah.
here. Start
We get
recording on
everyone
there.
wired back up.
Yeah, I'm get wired. Can you help get wired up? That'll be good.
We still have.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go and zoom in?
I'm recording there. Just when someone's talking.
Just zoom in.
Yeah.
It's basically you can tell.
Yeah, we're all recording now. Record. That's recording. That's recording. I wish I could better.
It's half battery on this one. You're okay, I think. Sorry? Oh yeah, you're fine. Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome back to our TRT, HRT supplement nutrition panel that we have here at Olympia University. So we just had a little bit of an intermission and a few cool questions came up. So kind of give you a little preview of what we're gonna touch on. So I'm gonna first have Rick Collins here speak about the future of testosterone, kind of where he sees this going legally. We already talked about why it's a Schedule 3, but where that future may be going and why. I also want to ask George, specifically Dr. Tuliatos, about his experience with anabolic abuse. So we're all talking about use, we're all gung-ho on all of it, but kind of give that other side perspective that he definitely has a very good perspective on that. And then for the rest of our panel, I definitely want to talk about, I had a couple of questions about estrogenic compounds in our environment and how you feel they're affecting the population as a whole, where the big ones are, what those are coming from, and really how they're affecting the health in general and where you see that taking this. So we'll see how far we get into all of that. So I'm going to go pass it on to Rick first so he can talk about where he sees the future of testosterone going.
So thank you, Lacey. So for many years, I've had physicians ask me, Rick, why Schedule 3? Is there ever going to come a time where there'll be less of a restriction, these DEA, and these restrictions and regulations that DEA imposes on us? Is there any chance that we'll ever get non-controlled status or reduced status? And of course, many of my clients in the bodybuilding community have been asking me for many, many years, Rick, why are we labeled as in the same category with heroin users and cocaine users and meth users? I'm just using testosterone. Why, is there any chance? And I've always said I don't see, certainly the bodybuilding community doesn't have the cloud of credibility as a society to ever make those kind of changes, I don't think. And I would have said probably, I don't really see a change in status coming until fairly recently. And a glimmer of hope appeared a couple of years ago that I wound up writing a column in Muscular Development about, and I've been speaking about it. Didn't really see it coming, and it's an alliance that, a new ally that, 10 years ago I never would have thought would have been there. And so it started when I read an article in a periodical written by a person who was assigned female at birth and was seeking not to become a man, but to be more masculine along a gender spectrum. And the article was fascinating because this person was extolling the virtues of testosterone and this radical change that it made in this person's life. Because this person wanted to be, not a man, but to have broader shoulders and to be more generally muscular, leaner. I remember specifically a wider jaw, some beard growth, and testosterone. A doctor prescribed testosterone, and the writer was lamenting that the restrictions on testosterone were stigmatizing and reducing access, and that this was effectively a problem for the trans community. And I started reading more articles by members of the LGBT community saying that the status of testosterone, estrogen is not controlled, testosterone is controlled at Schedule 3, and it is impeding the access of persons assigned female at birth to change their phenotype into something that is more in line with how they identify themselves. And lo and behold, I then see an article that 2 US senators have proposed descheduling testosterone from the Controlled Substances Act, either by reducing it to Schedule 5 instead of 3 and making it easier for physicians to prescribe, or by taking it out completely, and that the status of testosterone as a controlled substance is anti-trans. And so I've written about this and spoken about it, and of course when bodybuilders hear this is quite a surprise to them. Some of them say, look, this is something I've been pushing for all these years, and now, suddenly we've got this very friendly, very culturally powerful lobby that now may make a difference. And so where it's going to go, I don't know, but the fact that 2 members of the US Senate have gotten wind of it and are actually voicing their support for this change is sort of the only glimmer that I've seen in the 30 years that might suggest that there might be some reevaluation of testosterone as a controlled substance.
And that's probably coming from the fact that, like you already mentioned earlier, as a society that's very James Cameron-y anti-testosterone, that would be the glimmer of hope. We can't have, bodybuilders with the epitome of masculinity.
Toxic masculinity.
I'd walk into Congress and go, hey, why are you doing this? They'd be like, well, look at yourselves. So definitely, I know it's a very interesting thing for practitioners to kind of maybe keep an eye on as far as where that's headed.
Well, in the UK, you can go to the local chemist, the local pharmacist, and if you're a woman and start experiencing menopause, you can get intravaginal estrogen over the counter from a pharmacy or ask the pharmacist. So could that be the direction, at least in Europe and the UK, would be nice, that would go? I don't think so, because with the estrogen, the normal standard estrogel, and some of the oral tablets, they're not being made to go over the counter. And so I doubt that, if anything, testosterone in the UK, like in the US, may be removed from the controlled substance list. But then, you've got other countries like the Scandinavian countries that will just look at you, and if you're too muscly, they'll make you do a drugs test so you can use your gym.
Yeah.
So it's
Muscle
hard to-
profiling
Yeah.
as the basis of an arrest.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah.
It's a definitely interesting world out there. So, like I said, we talked a lot about the use therapeutically, how it can help so many people just come back to a normal way of living and feel better and reduce all those other pharmaceuticals that are out there. I'm going to pass the microphone to Dr. Tuliados to talk a little bit about his experience with anabolic abuse and kind of just that little flip side of that for a few minutes and just kind of give us the other side of that story. So here you go, Doug. That's yours.
Yeah, so even though I come from the bodybuilding community now, I think more of us as physicians, so I'm against the abuse, and especially what freaks me out is that people combine TRT along with AAS abuse. I told them this is not the wrong perception that you have. I mean, during the winter time, use a little bit crude testosterone, then for the summertime mix and throw a little bit of steroids on top of this. This is how testosterone is demonized by the physicians, because it's joined with the abuse of the steroids, and it's a totally different philosophy. So replacement therapy is about optimization, while steroid abuse is a vanity thing, of course, and it messes up literally the internal organs and the abuse, not the medical prescribed dose of the steroids, and it messes up the labs and it goes to the wrong direction. I consider steroid abuse as a public health issue that starts from puberty, even high school, and then goes to spreads out to the society. We have to admit that this is because of the models and the type of this sociology that say that this man has a six-pack, he's a supermodel, he makes money, or this particular athlete is very successful in life, and it's up to the standard that the society has. And of course, as Rico said, that somebody wants to improve the way he looks, his sex drive, his self-esteem, even his performance at work. You know, it's not bad using steroids. The point is, through the controlled substance in the Control Act in the States, the underground labs are rising dramatically, and it's not so safe to put unofficial stuff into the body. So either they have polluted materials inside, or they're uncontaminated, or heavy metals, or either underdose, or literally nothing, so they rip you off. So I support replacement therapy and optimization, steroid abuse, another thing. Bodybuilding, unfortunately, engages this thing, and sports by bodybuilding is an extreme sport with anabolic steroid abuse. And also my other task is how to minimize the risk, so harm reduction and the steroid abuse we have, because we have to admit it exists, okay? So demonizing is not a good thing. So if you can give solutions like to somebody who smokes, and you can tell them that you can use more of NAC or vitamin C or glutathione to protect your respiratory system, that's the same how it goes to somebody who wants to abuse steroids for his own reasons, and you have to help for the longevity of the lifestyle.
And I think you bring up a really good point in that, Dr. Tuliados. Whenever you're looking at a competitive athlete, and you guys can probably all speak to this, no matter what sport they're competing in, whether it's bodybuilding or strongman or marathon running, when you are a competitive athlete, there's really nothing innately healthy about pushing your body to that level. And so it really is all about mitigation of effect at that point until they're retired and you can then provide solution. So I think that's a great point you brought up. So you guys have anything to say about that? That would be
Well, I think, as a physician, one of the things we have to do is be a little bit open-minded to allow our patients to come to us and tell them, if my athletes are afraid to tell me they're doing these things around, that creates a big problem. So you feel to not chastise people when they do come to you, and you get to be open-minded of why they're doing this, and then work with them in a safe manner. Because the problem is they're afraid to even talk to their physicians or talk to anybody to do this in a legal manner because of what they've been doing. If I can help them to kind of bridge that gap, they come to me and they are doing, sort of substances that are dangerous, that they're getting from places that who knows where, and they can come to me and I say, let's try and help you in a safe, logical manner and still get you the then that's going to make this, that's going to help this world. But the problem is, if that kind of person, comes to me and I'm going to, we're only going to give you this much testosterone and we're not going to do this, I think you have to be willing to say, yes, there are people who are going to need to dose differently. You are going to need to work within that realm to realize that we need to do this in a safer fashion and let them feel comfortable talking to us about that, because most of them are not going to come to a physician and talk to us about that, right? Especially if they know that we're just going to say, hey, listen, what you're doing is horrible. I'm going to stop all that. Let's give you this. So what I do with my clients is understand where they're coming from and how I can help them do what their goals are in a safe manner.
And that's what's so unfortunate, right? Is exactly that. So there's an environment where it's not to be discussed, and because of that, it's not open. And because it's not open, they, rather than seek help from individuals like yourselves, they instead go to the internet or they go to their buddies, and then that's where their knowledge and their wisdom and their advice ends up coming from. And it's so unfortunate, but because of that, the misinformation that then runs amok and creates further problems with these individuals, rather than having an opportunity to do something from a safe and an educated manner, they're doing things from what I would just say is a reckless manner. Given the athletes that I work with and have worked with through the years, if an athlete chooses to go down that road, that's a road that we go down together. Obviously, I'm aware of what we're doing, and it is mind-blowing to me when I'll read internet boards and things like that, and people reference clients of mine, and they say, well, this individual can do that, but I can tell just by looking at him that he's on this and this and this and this. And they'll throw out amounts that just make me laugh because it's just so incredibly off-kilter. It makes me scared that I guess the normal guy in the gym who decides to go down that road and is self-educating because he's ashamed or discouraged from seeking resources from qualified individuals, these individuals are taking amounts that don't make any sense whatsoever. I mean, I'll see the things and I'm like, that is literally probably 70% more than what I know I have that client doing at the moment. I would know, I'm the guy. And yet, you're telling and preaching this as its knowledge that, well, if you want to be on that level, if you want to be successful, if you want to be a superstar or whatever, you got to do this and this and this. And it's so wrong. Everybody thinks it's 15 compounds, and everybody thinks there's a secret. I can't tell how many times I've done a seminar, or when I go to, let's just say, a World's Strongest Man or the Olympia, the Arnold, wherever, and an individual will come up to me thinking that there's a secret. Hey, what's the secret for why so-and-so is so much better than everybody else? Well, he works harder than you. Like, it's real simple, because anybody who's a champion of anything, whether they're natural or whether they're enhanced, they work harder than everybody else. Nobody stumbles into being great. And that's why, unfortunately, the environment that is painted that these individuals are in or hesitant to approach someone and get education on, unfortunately, that's the road they take.
Yeah, that's just such a good point, because people do think I can just take all these things and I'll be this great, strong person.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you all the things in the world. The people who are doing what your clients are doing are, number one, gifted from a perspective that I will never meet, and number two, work harder than most of us will ever do. I mean, like Lance Armstrong, he got all this criticism, right? Lance Armstrong was a superhuman, right?
Right.
What he did, he was a superhuman.
Because his
And
work
to
ethic,
downplay
yes, exactly.
the amount of work he is and the amount of physical, the amount of innate talent, and just say all he did was,
Right.
do drugs, and that's why he's the way he is. It was unfortunately very, very cruel.
It seems like it's a way for some people to kind of address certain inadequacies by just saying, oh, well,
Yeah, he's doing all this stuff.
Correct.
He's doing these massive amounts of.
And it's not right. One thing I want to touch on is that we've seen, just some normal gym goers, patients, the hobbyists who train really hard all their lives. I mean, they could have been personal trainers, they or just really good average gym goers. Diet was on point, rest was on point, they had big jobs, but they found themselves with low testosterone. And again, it could be to the point of overtraining, but as we look at some of these patients, they've just had low testosterone. They're in the mid-30s to early 40s, even in the 50s. But what I've noticed from these guys is when they do start TRT, all of a sudden everything comes together. very, very quickly, they say, oh, we've got all this muscle mass, I didn't have this before. Even though they're training very hard and doing all the right things, they still do the right things. They add in the hormone optimization, and they take it to the next level. So it can be done, but at the same time, we have to be careful that the patients aren't going against. So if the doctor prescribes them, TRT, that they're not taking other substances besides that, and sometimes that's a risk when you try to help with harm reduction. I think you may have seen, George, that some patients will be a bit cheeky, and they'll, I'll just take this, I'll take that, because they want to have control over what they're doing. And we want to be able to have some certain freedom, but it's medical treatment at the end of the day, even with the harm reduction, that they should stay the course and follow what the doctor's instructions are, and work with the doctor, talk to the doctor if something's not going right, to make any changes that are needed into their protocol.
I understand that sometimes those patients are doing that because of if the doctor's treating the labs, things like that, so they're on testosterone replacement, like, well, I'm not feeling the effect of this. So now they start adding other things in, whereas if they would just work with us and say, okay, yes, your labs look great, but you can feel better here, we may have to be willing to give a little bit more. So it is listening to symptoms to optimize. And so lots of times those patients come to us doing all these things beyond what the doctors recommended, even the doctors, because they're still not optimized.
There are some people with perfect labs, and they have high expectations sexually, and I'm telling them, there are some people with perfect labs, but even though they have high expectations of sexuality, I'm telling them with 100 or 200 milligrams of testosterone, you cannot expect to be porn star. Okay? So think easy. So all this is different. I'm using half a gram of testosterone rather than taking 200. So there's a limit, and you cannot expect to have 5 ejaculations in 24 hours or in the forest.
All right, so what I want you guys are talking about some of the younger people that you're seeing. So I want you to kind of maybe expand a little bit, and we can kind of again start at the end there and move down is to why do you think this may be happening as a population, as well as where do you think this part of medicine is going and how it can help, and like where people, as we're kind of getting toward the end of our discussion, what to look for, what questions to ask the practitioners, things like that they know they're in the right place. So like I said, twofold, kind of why is this happening as a population, and what's in our food, what's in our environment, like what's going on there, and then where people can seek that extra little help and not just be treated numbers kind of stuff. So I'm gonna start you on it.
Okay.
Yes.
I was talking with Rick in the hallway. He said, at the same time you have baby boomers born between 1945 and 1965, getting at the age where the testosterone is low, so relying on these men, that fought the Second World War. You also, their dads. And then you have at the same time, Generation Xers and following generations that are, this is nexus, where you have not one, but 2 different major populations, maybe 3, that are low in testosterone, right? So it's an interesting nexus where there's a lot of demand for this from the medical practitioner standpoint. And I don't want to get off track. I want to answer your question. What did you want me to focus on?
So why do you think this is happening?
That's why. It's because the population, number one, and you asked about the endocrine disruptors. There are so many endocrine disruptor chemicals, and there's other environmental factors too. So yeah. So just to, and every physician will have different comments, but just for things that I like to research, blue light toxicity from screens is a real thing that disrupts hormone production. It actually is in the eyeballs. And if you're not making dopamine, it's going to have an effect on testosterone. Electromagnetic field pollution. Literally, wireless devices on the laps are going to have an effect on testicular production of testosterone. Most especially for those that drive electric vehicles. Sorry, you're sitting on the battery. That's very, very toxic, and we're seeing increased risk of prostate cancer in all of the electric vehicle drivers sitting on top of batteries, just emitting this huge, terrible electromagnetic field. And there's a lot of hygiene as far as your environmental hygiene. When do you redshift or block a blue light device? When do you turn your Wi-Fi off at night? Because we're affecting the brain, pituitary. But I don't think those are the major ones, and I'll let the physicians expand on it, because the load of endocrine disruptive chemicals that are in our environment, there's 80,000, and there are so few that are actually properly classified. They're raising sexual binding globulin, and they're stopping hormone production. I'll tell you about one. Why people say, why do I need to be free of bisphenol A? Bisphenol A, which is a plastic compound that is ever present in high amounts in thermal register receipts. You touch the receipts. How many times a day? How many times a week do you do that? Bisphenol A blocks hormone metabolism. You know, we have the hormone metabolism just goes to this, and androstenedione, testosterone. Every step of that hormone cascade is blocked by by bisphenol A. And how can we tell this in some patients on labs? High cholesterol value, low pregnenolone, low every other hormone, because dietary cholesterol gets converted to pregnenolone next. And if you're toxic with these plastics, bisphenol A in particular, it's not the only one, you're going to find tremendous disruption. It makes the case more difficult for the practitioner to deal with, but it can be done. So in short, environmental factors, endocrine disruptor chemicals, I think, are some of the reasons. And then I touched on early too. You know, when we started to see this low testosterone in men of middle age, so more of the baby boomers than the younger generations, because they just weren't as polluted. When they start to go on drugs that deplete certain nutrients crucial for testosterone synthesis, peeing out their zinc and magnesium, we start to see that. So there's a number of reasons that we see, and the physicians will tell you what they see and how they treat it.
The chemicals are huge, and I don't know what to do about them. Unfortunately, for instance, the neurotoxins that are in our food and in our environment have become 99% of people will test very high levels in the urine for all sorts of neurotoxins. And unfortunately, we actually don't really have a treatment for that. So, if you look at the military now, their clothing is saturated in mosquito repellent. So now we have these military guys who actually have some of the worst neurotoxins that they're breathing in every day. We're spraying all our crops with it. Honestly, it's really frightening, and I don't know that there's an easy answer from a medical perspective, because those are actually things we don't right now know how to eliminate out of the body. You can take all the NAC in the world, it doesn't help. Taurine may help a little bit with some of these, but there's not a lot of workarounds until we start changing our policies on the things that we're throwing into the environment. So, that's unfortunately, I think, a huge issue. I think the driving down cholesterol, where we're now number one, still, nobody should eat meat, everybody's on statin drugs. And most of my patients come in with cholesterol levels of 130. We actually know that from 2019, great study, 13 million people, the least likelihood of dying is a cholesterol of 220 to 250. Has to be the right type of cholesterol. So we're driving down cholesterol to the point where you can't make hormones. It's absolutely impossible to make hormones. And the doctors are all, good job, we got your cholesterol down to 130. And you say, no, actually now your brain's suffering, your heart's suffering, you don't have any ability to make hormones. So I think that's, I think that those two things are a huge piece. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of things we don't have very easy answers to. I can take a person off the statin drugs, I can try and normalize their cholesterol. I can't get rid of the neurotoxins very easily, very disrupting things. Replacing things is helpful. It's not going to still probably save us from a lot of this stuff that's going on until we start changing environmental policy.
It's interesting you say with cholesterol. I found that in the US compared to at least the UK, there seems to be an obsession, at least for the past 20 years, around cholesterol. What's your cholesterol number?
Don't eat eggs.
People don't realise, they're just fixated. So anyway, in Europe and the UK, it's like, okay, if you're over 5, it's really much higher. Then do something about it. If you've got really hypercholesterol, you actually need to drink things, really high cholesterol. But generally speaking, But as far as there's plastics in the room now they're finding. So children are getting it from a very young age. How do you get away with that? I've always thought, well, not in fact 5 with 5, but if these are chemicals and you've got your own natural testosterone chemicals or other hormones that are deficient, you're just going to have to, that's going to be the adaptation that humanity is going to have to go through until the environment is cleaned up. And I don't know if and when that will be. For me personally, I started TRT in my 20s, at 22. And maybe it was I think it was due to a varicocele. No one could say for sure. Some of the urologists at the time said, oh, that won't affect the testosterone too much. And very little, maybe a little bit more the fertility. But overall, it all kind of adds up, to the generation, the time I was born into, the chemicals in the environment. There's lots of things you can just go mad trying to eliminate them all. But how do you have to live in a bubble? So, I think the other ergogenic aids, the supplements, the hormones, they all contribute
Optimize ourselves
as
much
best as we
can,
can,
right?
you know, until
Despite the things that we're living in.
until we move off to Mars or something. And even then, it's probably our own.
Brilliant. Genetics. That's it. Thank you.
So what do you think is causing this generational?
Yeah, we mentioned the lousy lifestyle, that insomnia also kicks cortisol and prolactin that antagonizes stress. Stress also, insomnia is a form of stress as well. Stress, of course, eats up muscles and genesis. And soy, estrogen, alcohol, perhaps weed, marijuana, will keep.
That's good enough. I think that's good enough, yeah.
And the lack of physical activity, yes, so having more physical fat raises estrogens, that also raises it, that attacks the free testosterone. So it's a circle, and this generation is less of physically active rather than, I remember in my, at school, we were not having the social media, and everybody was out and playing, instead of now that everybody stays at home and keeps on a wall screen, and this is really pathetic.
And really all these factors kind of contribute basically to a general scenario of just chronic inflammation. And that's kind of where everything eventually rolls downhill to, or uphill I guess you could say, is just a state of chronic inflammation from any of these various deficiencies or environmental influences that are happening. And here we go again with insulin, since that's my thing. So as you have that, and you have those reduced levels of insulin sensitivity, and the body is in a state of elevated glucose levels, with that, by default, the body is under attack, inflammation factors just go off the roof. When that happens, guess what? You retain fluid like a camel, exponentially. Well, when you're retaining fluid rather than excreting, you're literally prolonging your exposure to all these concerns and all the chemicals and the influences that then drive down the various hormone responses. So it's a complete vicious circle that still kind of comes down to insulin.
So about, I think it was maybe 6 months ago, there was an article that came out regarding a study of prehistoric male skulls. And what they found, and they were looking at the shape of the skulls and how it was different than modern humans, these early hominids. And what they found and theorized is that the shape and size of the brow indicated that our prehistoric ancestors had much higher testosterone levels than we do, and that the change in the skulls coincided with the beginnings of civilization. And so testosterone, and there's a lot of literature on endogenous testosterone and how testosterone is a facilitator. It meets the challenge. It rises to meet a challenge. And there's been physical challenges, all sorts of challenges is what causes your endogenous testosterone to rise. And so gradually this slow decline in testosterone levels generationally may be an evolutionary response to an environment that poses less and less challenges. And the reduction in physical challenges has probably been more dramatic recently than in history. And certainly, what does this mean for the future as children have less and less physical challenges, as sort of a culture of safetyism is more and more prevalent, so that there's very little physical activity. A lot of kids no longer go to gym. Many men no longer have the hunting and gathering that took place by our ancestors of spearing dinner and fighting off that saber-toothed tiger before he ate you. Those days are gone for most of us, and for most men, they sit at their computer terminals. Most don't even go to the gym. We've got 60 or 70% of Americans now overweight or obese, which ties into fat and all of the other metabolic syndromes that we've talked about. So yeah, I think the future may be good if we continue to reduce the challenges, physical challenges and other challenges that we face as a society. And I think at some point we have to rethink this sort of, safetyism both in children and in adults. We talked at the break that I think 75% of the young people now in the US would not qualify, they wouldn't meet the physical standards to be in the military. What does that mean for our future? So I think that the decline in testosterone for all of those reasons is something that we really are going to need to address and soon.
Yeah, that's an interesting, that whole evolutionary perspective. Because you're right, I mean, exercise, especially heavy weightlifting, raises testosterone, right? And people are not doing that so much anymore. Different in this crowd, obviously, but in general, you're not doing, my sons didn't have PE anymore.
And we're into discouraging, the link between masculinity and testosterone is one that is both is sort of being marginalized by society as something bad. Getting back to James Cameron and all the others that are sort of demonizing toxic masculinity. The American Psychological Association a couple of years ago came out with a position paper essentially saying that traditional masculinity is toxic. The traditional masculinity is a bad thing. And so, think about testosterone is so intertwined with that, testosterone bad, masculinity bad. It's not surprising that we're seeing these sort of declines.
I'm going to comment on a couple of things you said, Rick, and then kind of pick up something for the audience. Like, because we swim in, it's depressing when you think of what a toxic soup we swim in. What can you do? You got to start somewhere. But picking up on what you said, Rick, I read an article a while ago from the 1950s to today, just the reduction in kilocalorie expenditure because we don't walk as far. We use escalators and elevators, and we don't wash our clothes by hand. My grandmother had one of those things. And, with those washboards. And I grew up in Pennsylvania, in a steel mill town south of Pittsburgh, okay? And what was a town of 6 steel mills and 3 glass factories, that's blue-collar workers, right? We don't have those occupations anymore. Right? There's so little of that. And that's causing, a great cultural shift. But and interesting on the value of masculinity, it is related to testosterone, the purpose of this panel, but there's an interesting video, it's a short one, it's by Jordan Peterson. Now think about those blue-collar men. We still depend on them. And like he said in his video, they are up on skyscrapers, they're on your high-tension wires, they're underneath the ground, they're keeping the entire infrastructure that our modern society depends on working. What are we going to do without them? You got to value them. And I applaud all the people that are gaining knowledge for themselves and for their patients to learn how to deal with this, because we have to function in the world of optimal testosterone hormones in our environment. And as far as the toxins go, and I get this question too, I sell detox supplements. Where do you start? That's one of the things Dr. Yurk and I talk about, like the physicians say. Do we start with thyroid? Do we start with gut? Do we start with detox? Do we start with hormones? There's no mistake. You got to start somewhere, right? Hormones have so much benefit. But for detoxing, if you can put your body in a state where you're spitting out the toxins faster than they're coming in, because they are, what are all the things you can do? Whatever you can afford to do. There's a lot of doctors that recommend drinking distilled water to help get rid of the heavy metals. Heavy metals, you can get rid of them with chlorella, spirulina, as long as it's pure. EDTA suppository, something my pharmacy makes for all the guys at the test site, Nevada test site, they're infected, they're borreliosis. They have beryllium. They touch the beryllium bars of the pair of hands for 20 years. So we have to get the metals out. Guys, maybe you shouldn't have done it. Far infrared sauna, oral exercise. You got to sweat. And then even better, right after you sweat, get rid of that stuff. Jump into the shower with something that scrubs the skin so that you're not getting that toxin back in. And talk about change of lifestyle from our ancestral lifestyle. Think about the genius of reducing inflammation by something as simple as barefoot grounding to the earth. When your feet are a stride's distance apart, you maximize the way your body picks up negative ions, negative electrons right from the earth. Best at the beach, but good anywhere to be barefoot. Now think about men who would leave the tribes in the morning, their village, to go walk toward the prey. Are they walking toward the sun? So they're walking feet at the perfect distance to create an arc. They're facing the direction of the sun, don't need to stare at it. There's a lot of cleansing of parasites that occurs right in the eyeballs, building of neurotransmitters. They are sweating, they are moving, they're pumping their lymphatic system. So if you can get to, I mean, if you live in a beach place, right? You're not living in Alaska right now, but you live in a beach place. Think how brilliant it is that you can get up, get out, and move. Walk on the beach, get some sunshine, sweat a little bit. And on top of that, plenty of
You're
things.
selling me on a snowbird to Florida.
Right? You gotta do it. And then also too, you have to have fiber in the gut. Okay, all the dietitians will tell you, look, if you can eat a dense nutritional spectrum of stuff, especially the things that are sulfurous. We talk about NAC, but cysteine donators are like cooked broccoli, cauliflower, the things that stink a little bit like sulfur. They help you detoxify. Then you're getting the fiber from all the vegetables because our liver does our liver accumulates all this stuff. And it makes 65,000 enzymes a day. It's busy. And it accumulates all this junk too. That's where our detoxification, it takes a lot of it takes place in the liver. But about 2 hours after we fall asleep, we dump it up. There's a bile dump that occurs. Well, you ever pour sand on an oil spill in your garage? You need that sand to pick it up. We need fiber in the gut to bind those toxins, to shoot them out. So there's plenty of other things that can be done. If you just say, what are the top 10 things I can do for detox, and search that somewhere, you'll find many. I just find my common recommendations are, yes, I've got a supplement of herbs, and acetylcysteine is one of the components that'll help with detox, but you also have to sweat. Get out and move, right? You gotta pump your lymphatic system, and whether sweat is reduced by working out or getting a sauna or both, replenish your electrolytes when you get in the sauna, we'll just trust me on that one. And have fiber in your diet so that you literally are eliminating it faster than it's coming.
We have to overcome the sedentary mentality. Just at the airport, as I was flying in here from JFK, those moving walkways are, in my view, that is to escalate my pace.
Right.
So I'm gonna get where I need to get more freeze. There are people who, as soon as they get to that moving walkway, they are statue. And they're slowly just looking around, not moving at all, and sometimes will block me as I'm trying to navigate my way through it. It's like, that's the mentality. Oh, I don't need to walk, so now I can just stand here and allow myself to be slowly transported a few steps ahead. We have to break that mentality.
Even here, I talk about stand on the escalator, and I walk up the escalator.
To use it as a speed mechanism.
Right. It's one of my pet peeves. I never will stand on an escalator. I think I'm dragging my suitcase. I'll pick it up and walk up the escalator. They're designed to move you faster, not move you.
Maybe it's just the New Yorker in me, but please move.
All right, so what I want to do now is, if there are any questions out there, let's take those.
I work for a clinic.
We've got 1, 2, 3, so I'll start here and then come to these two, yeah? Go
And
ahead.
I work for a clinic, and some of the things you guys were talking about, a lot of the environmental toxins and stuff, because I'll get patients that will actually ask, like, how or why their testosterone levels are low. Youngest patient's 18 years old with testosterone levels less than 500. I'll explain some of those other things, but one of the things that kind of piggyback on the ancestral type things is that a lot of cultures used to have a rite of passage where boys became men. And that's something that's really been eliminated on most societies or cultures today. Is the physical activity, because there were always physical challenges. Right? And then also, as far as TRT is concerned, one of the things that I kind of run into is some men will actually have a reduction in libido or loss of penile sensitivity. And sometimes I'll run thyroid panels, DHEA, progesterone, pregnenolone, and try to optimize a lot of those, and sometimes they'll still have problems. So I don't know if you guys had any experience with that, to be able to help patients like that may still have issues, even though their testosterone levels are between 1,000 and 1,200, kind of optimizing that aspect.
So you want us about this in the fetus system, the modern works. Doesn't tell you anything if you have the level of testosterone 700 if you do fasting, because fasting elevates SABG. So even when fasting lowers insulin, SABG goes up and fetal testosterone goes down. I had a case from US. This guy was keto diet of his wife. He had 700 levels of testosterone, lack of sex drive. Another parameter we have to estimate is prolactin. And of course, very high estrogens can affect the duration of the erection.
Oh, yeah. I'll run those on those.
Of course, calcium and estrogens.
Oh, yeah. Usually I find in most guys, trial levels between 3 and 5% of the total testosterone are usually pretty good. But that's just a bell curve, you know. I've had guys with as high as almost 10% and they feel fine.
Good with the also is HCG that improves intratesticular testosterone and gives you a good quality of sex.
Yeah, yeah, usually it does. I have a very small amount of patients that still have problems.
So I want to speak to that from a cellular perspective, because I think that one of the things that all this looking from hormones forgets there's other things that go awry in our body. One is peptides, but those are kind of considered that they're not natural. They actually are. We make peptides. So our own body makes peptides. One of the things that happens as we age is we lose mitochondrial function. And there's a lot of things that are contributing to that, including coding, things like that, that make your mitochondrial function worse. When you start losing mitochondria, some peripheral neuropathies, you start getting more neuropathic things, symptomatology, brain fog, things like that. So a lot of times you have to optimize mitochondrial function. People who still don't have energy. So how do you optimize mitochondrial function? It's a little tougher to do, especially as we age, or especially if there's things that have disrupted mitochondria. Think about the worst mitochondrial function, diseases like ALS, you lose all your function. But a lot of us are heading down that road just more slowly. So the way mitochondria sort of grow is that they're their own little bacteria. They're cool, right? They live inside you, they're their own bacteria, they're their own genome. And the way they tell the body to make more is they actually produce their own peptides. Something called MOD-SC, which is a mitochondrial peptide. So a lot of times what we'll do in my longevity protocol, we quarterly replace some of the peptides that are lost, like epitalon, like MOD-SC, which is a little more difficult to access for most people.
Yeah.
But we'll quarterly use things that are mitochondrial enhancers. You can get some mitochondrial improvement with urolithin. So urolithin is it's a little bit like coenzyme Q, except it gets inside the mitochondria. It's one of the few supplements that can actually get inside the mitochondria. You can get it from pomegranates, but only about 30% of people can make it from pomegranates. There's one company that makes urolithin, it's called Mitocure, and that actually can really help. But always think when people are correct everything, it sounds like you have optimized everything. Think about mitochondria. Mitochondria for peeing, for neuropathy, for neuropathic symptoms, erectile dysfunction, those kinds of things are still going on. Lots of times it's mitochondrial issue.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's something I never thought of, but, so optimizing mitochondria, because some of those things that you mentioned would be hard to get.
Right. And that's the hard stuff. Yeah, you're right. I mean,
So,
from our perspective,
like PQQ or
so
coenzyme.
PQQ doesn't really cross the mitochondrial membrane too well. Urolithin is huge, and studies of urolithin just from you can take urolithin and improve even in a high level athlete. You can actually improve their function. But I found it to be super helpful for a lot of people, especially if anybody's doing post-COVID fatigue stuff. That's mitochondrial issues, and using just like urolithin relatively high doses can be super helpful.
Okay, I appreciate it.
All right. Your question.
Yeah, I had a question for, is it Nathan?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you ever use vanadium or chromium to enhance glucose sensitivity?
Yes, yeah, we both had a discussion with that about that.
Oh,
During
okay.
the break as well, absolutely.
Yeah.
GTF chromium is extremely effective. And vanadium is funny because he had mentioned the GTF to me and we were discussing that, and then I threw the vanadium at him.
Yeah.
ALA, alpha-lipoic acid, is it still the R form? No, usually, just the regular. But with that, even the vanadium or the vanadil sulfate in particular, that kind of fell off the charts in the 90s or whatever, if you will, but it was ridiculously effective. If you took that and you didn't have it nearby, you definitely could tell it was eliciting impact. So absolutely, the GTF should almost be like a prerequisite for anybody that has an issue in that, especially.
Like 200 micrograms or?
It depends.
Depends on the person?
There's a difference between therapeutic dosing and, just maintenance dosing. So to be honest with you, this, none of this I'm about to tell you is published in medical literature, just experience with local practitioners. Would use a GTF chromium in type 2 diabetics that have horrible postprandial excursions. And they'll use big doses, meaning 1,800 micrograms in a patient that weighs less than 200 pounds before each meal for a day. Live there for a month. You can overdo it and you can accumulate chromium. So RBC chromium is a crucial lab because it can be quite toxic. But they had tremendous effect combining it with another, you know, bunch of companies will market, lower your blood glucose with a supplement, vanadium sulfate is a part of it. Sustained release alpha-lipoic acid tablets, but anyone who has been insulin resistant for a long time, you can guarantee their chromium is depleted, right? And the GTF chromium, if they're over 200 pounds, it's 600 microgram capsules. Company I buy mine from is called Pure Encapsulations. They sell it at a good price. I think it's 120 capsules in a bottle. It's cheap. Anybody who's 200 pounds or more, they would just, and these are physicians that practice locally, they would use 2,400 micrograms, 2.4 milligrams before meals 3 times a day for a month. And really improved insulin sensitivity dramatically, but can't sustain those doses. The 200 micrograms is typically the US RDA dose. I don't think the US RDAs are optimal daily intake. There's a difference between what they recommend, but definitely you have to modulate that. So I do see those things. And I wanted to comment on the mitochondrial function too. So as a civilian consultant, I got to get an assignment from an admiral who's a physician friend of mine, hormone therapy prescriber. He's in his late 60s. Hey, study these technologies that Russians use to make their Spetsnaz really tough. The Spetsnaz, don't tell the Navy SEALs this, are physically superior than to our Navy SEALs. And of all the things, their particular way they train, that's one thing, but what I was told to study was things related to mitochondrial health that they may use that would enhance their performance in the field. Red light therapy. 2 or 3 different frequencies, maybe they're invisible, non-invisible. There's a bunch of beds and panels that are out now, but the Russians use that on the ships because the operators typically working at night. They don't get sun exposure during the day. Every enzyme that's part of the Krebs cycle, that citric acid cycle in the mitochondria, has red chromophores on it. And just like you spin the alternator of a car faster, when you expose the body to red light, which penetrates 8 centimeters, you get the mitochondrial, you get ATPase, spinning more rapidly. So you kick off more ATP, the body's energy currency. They also use cold thermogenesis, the Wim Hof method. Now the Russian guys are tough, so they'll sit like the old boxers in the 70s in a bathtub of ice. But then cold thermogenesis induces the body's production of more mitochondria. So you multiply the number of mitochondria. I just read an article this week. It was in just some fitness magazine, and it was cold dip therapy or cold showers increasing testosterone 30% within 20 minutes in men and women. So that's a profound effect, but the mitochondrial effect too. And then just as a note, those are the 2 things that are mitochondrial related. The other technology they use is neuromuscular electrostimulation. I've trained people to use the Compex device is the one. The Compex company isn't trained to use it properly, but it really works. Mike and I talked about it. And the other thing too, since we're on this panel of hormones and steroids, it's very common for the Russians, these Spetsnaz guys, they really like the DHT derivative. A lot of them use Testosterone.
Yes.
They use Proviron because they don't want bulky muscle. There's law of diminishing return with muscle. Most operators, all special forces, are carrying 80 pounds of gear. You want to get strong fast, put a rucksack on, make sure you have a hip belt, put 30, 40, whatever pounds, and start walking. I think a rucksack looks more cool than one of those vests. So I don't wear a plate, I don't wear a rucksack. And ruck walking gets your body strong fast. And that's one of the things that they use. They use the DHT analog that would make nice, dense muscle. Of course, they all have a similar pattern of hair loss. Oh, it is.
So you can also H-bot, hyperbaric oxygen to along the lines of thread. And then actually using some improved mitochondrial function using exogenous ketones, maybe ketosis, but adding exogenous ketones like 10 moles of a ketone ester 3 times a day will also help improve
And those DHT derivatives like Testosterone also dramatically enhance insulin sensitivity too. And not to recommend the use of Trenbolone, it's got its whole other side. But yes, but Trenbolone dramatically, more than anything I have ever seen, increases insulin sensitivity. It's awful.
Is hypoglycemic because it's the first cortisol. That's why it's so
crushes.
cortisol is a hypoglycemic.
So Dr. P, I want to make sure that I heard what you said previously. So the DHT analogs,
We saw analog and Proviron, they crash using the G.
they crash insulin
They are a
sensitivity.
great leader in cancer.
Libido enhancers. Okay, that's what she said. And the Trenbolone,
It's hypoglycemic.
Right. So,
because it increases insulin.
yes, and
But we don't have access to
Crash from
Trenbolone.
cortisol, which is hypoglycemic.
And with bodybuilders, they always talk about that rebound period after a contest. If a bodybuilder has used Trenbolone as part of his final weeks of prep for that 8, 10, 12 weeks, whatever his cycle was, the reason why they get that incredible growth period of about like a month after the contest, yes, in part because they've been restricted food, but they don't get fat like a whale.
It's very energetic, it's very strong.
Yes.
So it's about simple.
And it lasts long beyond cessation of use. So they get that benefit still the month or two even after.
Yes, it's an afraid of
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Can I ask a question and also a comment? So it kind of makes sense that a couple of patients that I've used, that I work with, that have used Trenbolone, notice an increase in hunger or drop in glucose.
Yeah.
But then also when they discontinue it after their cycle, that they have a significant drop in libido or experience ED for a while. But I
It's
don't-
very suppressive with HPDA because it binds tightly to the androgenic receptor in the brain, and it kills endogenous production.
Well, yeah, but they're still using testosterone. So that's the caveat that I have, like wondering, and after about a month, their libido does seem to come back, but I'm just wondering what that rebound effect comes from.
Trenbolone tends to bind extremely hard to the androgen receptor, far more so than testosterone. And so
5 times more than this.
Yes, and so that's why you're getting that carryover where it's not too interested in regular old testosterone right now because it's just had
And also
Trenbolone.
about the ratio, you have to use double dose of testosterone to have a decent libido along with Trenbolone, so 2 to 1 the ratio.
Yeah, because usually what I do is just increase their testosterone after they come up. That's the only additive that actually would try to combat that.
I think Courtney had a question.
Yeah, I kind of have just like a broad question and more, I don't want to send us deep because I know we're at time, but I think a lot of, this is an awesome brain trust here. We're all here to educate and to share. And we've talked a lot about how screwed up the world is. And we all know it, and we're kind of all preaching to the choir. I'd love just from your each unique lenses of the industry and the world, what are those, like, how are we going to initiate change? What are you seeing working as far as bringing, quote unquote, the others into our world? I mean, I'm in my late 20s, and I'm kind of on my own version of try to educate my friends who have been on the pill for 20 years, or like little things here and there, but to actually bring this more and more mainstream. I'm just curious what, from a solutions perspective, you guys have seen working, or you think could work.
I think that's a great question to kind of just go down the line. So which side wants to start?
Go ahead, Greg.
So I think it really comes down to beginning to change the mindset of the sort of safetyism that is pervading society now. I think we sometimes swing the pendulum too far in one direction or another, and so we overcorrect social problems. I think that's, if there's anything to kind of learn from the various missteps that we've made as a society, it's that we take a problem and we address it by allowing the loudest voices against it, the activists who are usually the most extreme, and sort of swinging it in this completely different direction. I think we need to get away from this sort of mentality of the helicopter parenting and a lot of the stuff that has removed challenges, the idea that discomfort is something that's bad and needs to be avoided at all costs. I come from a bodybuilding perspective, and I've said this in many interviews and writings, is that in bodybuilding, the idea, not that it has to be no pain, no gain, that may be overly simplistic, but the idea that unless you put yourself into some level of discomfort, that's the only catalyst for change. There's going to be no change otherwise. So if you stop at that 8th repetition and you never push yourself into that discomfort zone, that pain zone, it's struggle, it's painful, it's tough. But those extra 2 reps are the ones that are going to make you grow. That without that discomfort, without that challenge, there's no growth physically. And I challenge yourself to break out of your safety zone. Nothing grows in a safe space, right? Safe spaces are completely dead. There will be no growth there. And until as a society, we really overcome this idea that, nobody can ever be made to feel uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable is the only way you're going to grow, because you're going to adapt. You will adapt to that, you'll overcome it, and you'll improve from it. The idea that we have to always be happy and always be happy as we are. There'll be no change otherwise.
Rick, how do you have, I mean, now we're in a world where, you know, I have 5 kids, and I watched this through the years, from my youngest who's 16, my oldest is 27. I watched it as a coach, you can't push too hard. Or
Each generation is more and more common.
So how do you go about changing that? I mean, I will tell you, I'm a mean-ass person, and my kids are really person I know, because I want them off of things, but every other person in their life, from their coaches to their teachers, me, the new doctors coming, I went through this abusive medical school trip. We were up all night, every other night. You know, you sat in the patient's bedside and
Like boot
criticized.
camp. Boot camp for
And now that
doctors.
you doctors, you don't really get enough sleep, you know, some of that's good. But how are you going to change that, even as you know that that's what has to happen? How are you going to change that?
Yeah.
I don't.
And I think lawyers have a problem too, is this, and a litigious society that's so worried, you know, I grew up at a time where I had a lot of fights when I was in elementary school. There was like a one year where I think I fought some kid every afternoon.
I remember
You know,
I was telling my son, next time he says something like that, you just hit him. I'm like, you can't do that.
Yeah, no, so now there would be, the police would be called, there would be, you know, expulsions, and everybody's concerned about being sued and liability, and we've become such a litigious society. You know, now, I played in playgrounds, I rode my bicycle everywhere, I never wore a helmet, you know, and it was a completely different world then, and I think we.
So we get rid of the lawyers?
Well, lawyers facilitate, but unfortunately, the population has become so litigious, and so they go to the lawyers, you know, years ago, if a teacher said that a student acted poorly in school, the parents would say to the student, what's the matter with you? Now, the parents immediately go to the school and yell at the teacher. So we need to really make these sorts of changes in society, and, you know, your generation, the younger folks, I think are the hope, is to begin to realize that there's gotta be a change if we continue to go in this direction, just from the military standpoint. When we have 100% of young people who are physically incapable of serving either as in the military, in the police department, in the fire department, it can't happen. So you know, I think the change has to come from the generations that succeed us.
And you would be an example of part of that solution, because you took it upon yourself to be curious and to educate yourself further on things that either don't make sense to you or areas you're trying to improve in your life. And that's something that self-accountability has somehow gone out the window at some point as well. Everyone wants someone else to do it for them, and then I'll do it. Well, you do it. You go first. You know, you walk down that line first, and then I'll walk after. That leads nowhere, because nobody then takes that first step. Nobody takes that first step. Nobody can improve and get anything else. So it's trying to change that mindset to where there's embracing someone's questions, embracing someone who's curious, not hammering people down, or well, don't ask about that, or that subject is taboo. Testosterone is illegal. We're not going to talk about that right now. You can't have that type of, be curious, ask the questions, and educate yourself. Get that foundation and seek out experts and things like that. But welcome the opportunity to learn is without having to be spoon-fed. Everybody can't do it for you. I don't have any athletes that I've ever worked with who got great after the person before them did first. There's always the trailblazer, there's always the pioneer. That's the person who's great. And that's that mindset that is unfortunately now, you know, minutiae.
Yeah, so my point of view is that we need to change our way of thinking about physical activity. We are overfat because we are under muscle. So we need to lift more weights in order to build muscle that can reverse diabetes, obesity, improve insulin sensitivity. All of them will take away from the cardiovascular disease. So women usually are afraid of getting bulky. Bulky makes you, fat makes you bulky. Actually, bodybuilders have a tiny section and they're 220 pounds, because muscle occupies way less space than fat. So we need to be aware that lifting weights along with eating protein will reverse diabetes, and if you add testosterone on top of this, then diabetes type 2 is totally reversible. So the society has to be engaged the philosophy of lifting weights is more beneficial than doing cardio in terms of long-term weight loss, because cardio does not change your BMR unless it's high intensity, while muscle doesn't only sculpt your body and close your body, your shoulders, and narrows your midsection, but also in the long run it will build tissue that will keep BMR and make you leaner and healthier.
I would say some of the sentiments that Rick had mentioned, where it's more litigious in the US, in the UK, it's a bit of a nanny state. So people put the pressure on the politicians make more laws, and then they have the regulators of these outside companies or quangos regulate and enforce those things on companies and on people. So you can't really do anything in the UK, as I said in my talk about, without a regulator. So any sort of industry has a regulator managing it. And I think there needs to be an understanding that you, and this is globally, but you need to be able to educate people, have people wanting to be educated. Because as I mentioned, like on our YouTube channel and many others, you can see such fluff, non-educational information get loads of views, and then those who are giving some good topical or good information, either deep dive, tend not to get as many views. So that's maybe people's attention span. And then finally, stopping the stigma around hormones and interventions. So often, I think particularly in Europe, it's like, oh no, you don't want that. That's a drug. You don't want to take that medication. No, just leave it alone. And again, it ties into the taboo around any kind of medication, and hormones in particular. And so, I mean, I would love to be able to set up some sort of societal organization. I was going to call, at least in the UK, the Sons and Daughters of Liberty, after the American Revolution, to kind of overthrow the tyranny of these thoughts around, testosterone, hormones, and the ability to use those. We can't change all of the things we like. The environmental toxins is a massive global issue. How do we remove them? But I just think, what we're trying to do, our armamentarium, what we're trying to fight with are the hormones, the supplements, lifestyle changes, and doing the best we can with what we've got. And hopefully there'll be a groundswell of change in future. And so, as I left, all people that you have influence with, politicians, anyone that you can talk to about it, you're doing your bit to maybe make a change, and hopefully that will multiply.
Yeah, and maybe it is in getting some of the high-profile people. If you look at James Cameron, did you see Elon Musk's response on Twitter to Cameron? I love my testosterone, right? You have to get some of the higher-profile people who right now most of the Hollywood high-profile people are in that other camp, right? So how do we get some of those people who are
And will cancel and threaten a dissenting perspective.
Right, exactly. So we saw that with recent events. So I think it is getting some of that. It's working with the people who are influential to that generation, and and changing it, because right now those people who are influential to that generation are giving the wrong message. So how do we bring those people into this camp? We talked about the hormones. Suzanne Summers was who started, and she got women to say, oh, I'm going to do hormone replacement, right? So it took really one really high celebrity person at that time. You get a few of those people into the camp, and you can make a change. So we just sort of start recruiting for those kind of people. We also have to start changing our attitude about aging, as we need to understand it as a disease process. Everything from arthritis to dementia to cardiovascular disease, that's all aging. Aging is a disease. So people have to start changing their attitude. If you think at 20, if I do everything right now, I will live to be 120, hopefully. But people, how often you guys get, when should I stop my hormone replacement? I'm like, never. I don't want to die. So we have to start changing that whole attitude from looking at life from that we are going to live hopefully to 120, not we're going to die at 80 in a wheelchair. So it started changing some attitudes about aging, starting at a very young age. In my world, orthopedics, it's even joint replacements, for instance. Arthritis is a disease, guys. It's not you just wore out your joint and put it in football. It is actually a disease process, and it's an not replacing everything, and assuming that everybody's, our price is gonna go on to a great replacement. So it's a little bit of changing to an attitude of understanding that this youthfulness needs to stay with us through life, starting from the age of 20 on, and getting influential people out there to spread that word.
And I'll try to, I'll summarize it real quick. We're out of time, quick. So, I have two sons that are homeschooled, they're 12 and 7. I homeschool them for a reason. and, you know, we put challenges on, and it's very different when they're out, no matter where the other kids go to school, there's something different. I try to, you know, wrestle with this. Well, when it comes to the hormone therapy and what we want to learn for health and wellness, I think the biggest drivers that are going to change, public demand, and public actually self-researching. Maybe not always an internet research, but there's plenty you can learn. Pick up some books and look at how medicine was practiced, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries, before we had the modernization with pharmaceuticals. Again, coming from confessions of a pharmacist, how we live our lifestyle. And then to identify practitioners that participate in that resonate with that. And then, you know, what Mike said about, you know, sometimes the nanny state perception, I see that when it comes to, well, I've got prescription insurance. I've got medical insurance. I only want to see my primary care doctor. 7.6 minute visit, one problem, 2 medications. That's it. No, you have to reject that. And the sad fact is, to live a healthy lifestyle, to see a practitioner that's educated and qualified, to get the supplements and hormone therapy that just sadly are needed because of our toxic 21st century environment, it's going to cost money. So that has to be done. But there's a lot that can be done with self-study and self-discipline. And I think that one of the things we touched on in a number of ways, because let's just face it, and if you want to research it and look at it, Henry Kissinger designed the War of the Sexes. He designed that to put men and women at odds with each other, and I think it's one of the reasons, not the only, that has led to the devaluation of masculinity. And it's okay teaching my boys to be masculine, but be gentlemen, not to be bullies, but to be gentlemen. Gosh, you know, if you're an astrologist, my boys were born under a water sign. I was not. My wife, when they start, they're very emotional. But when they get emotional, like I can't. I'll help them with this other stuff, but when they start, they're very emotional. And it's, you know, it's difficult. How we're going to overcome those challenges. I think the biggest thing is awareness and study. And whatever is mainstream, thrust upon us from the media standpoint, from society, some celebrities, it's the exceptional few. Oh my gosh, the movie I'm thinking of when you're talking about masculinity is the movie 300.
Oh, that's a great.
And then when you study it, so that led me to studying the ancient Spartans, ancient Greek societies. You know, the women were fighters too. I mean, they were tough people, but they embraced their roles within that. So if we're going to shift the pendulum the other way, I would like to myself study, you know, what would the cultures do in the past? How was medicine practiced in the past? How can we, you know, induce these challenges so that we can best replicate in our 21st century living some of these things? Not everybody has time to drive to a gym. That's why I mentioned rucksack walk. Well, I can't go to a gym, so I can't work out. You know what? Can you do something? Start somewhere. Get a pack on, walk. What if you did 10 squats on the hour every hour, 5 weight squats? Then you moved it to 20 on the hour every hour for 8 hours.
But it is, it's prioritizing where you put your money. The number of patients I have who come in and like, oh, I can't do this, it's too expensive, I see them get an Lexus car and drive out. Or who have a
Or even a $1,000 iPhone.
Right.
Or a $1,000 iPhone.
Nobody thinks twice, about a $1,000 iPhone, I tell them to spend $1,000 on their supplements. That's, oh, no, I can't do it, right? So it is a lot about prioritizing health. We see people at the end of their life sometimes, they'll throw every cent into trying to be healthy.
$8 a day on supplements.
Right.
I mean, really, and Dr. T probably have to replace all the nutrients that we're missing in 21st century society with good quality stuff, $250 to $350 a month you spend. And that's in addition to a good healthy diet. But how much you burn in a day when you drink an $8 Starbucks with all that toxic garbage and the sugars that we can skip. So, did we answer your question, Courtney?
I didn't expect you guys to have like formal answers to that, but I think it's always interesting to hear from everyone's different sides of the world, kind of where their heads are at. So, hand me shake.
Yeah, no, I think it was pretty clear. It's on her.
I'll fix it.
You handle it.
I want to thank our panel. You guys did an amazing job. You answered all the questions. I think honestly, I'm going to answer Courtney's question the way we start changing is doing things like this. I think this is the way we start changing the mindset of people, is putting this type of information out there, getting people talking about it, not putting that stigma on it. I think we need to talk about it and really people's minds in small percentages. So that's kind of my little 2 cents. I want to thank our panel. Thank you guys. Please give them a round of applause. They're really amazing. And go take a little break. We're going to come back here at 1 and get our afternoon session started in both the rooms. So have a good little break, and we'll talk to you soon.
My thing ran out of battery.
Oh, did it?
Talk it out.
This audience heard me.
Okay. I wish I picked it up. So, I saw the, yeah. Oh, we ran out of SD card as well in some accounts.
The cameras could take all that break.
It would be a wide limit to running.
That's true.
The whole team?
That one's still going. And that is it. Well, how many we?